My name's Jake Miller. I was 25 years old when my boss, Richard Hale, looked me dead in the eyes and told me I wasn't good enough for his company. That day burned into my memory like a scar. I remember standing in his fancy glass office, him leaning back in his leather chair, spinning a gold pen like he owned the whole world. "Jake," he said, sighing dramatically, "you're average. And average doesn't survive in my company." Average. That word stabbed harder than being fired. I worked harder than half his employees combined. I stayed late. I carried projects. I cleaned up messes created by managers who had their heads stuck so far up Richard's ego they couldn't see daylight, but none of it mattered, because Richard didn't want hard workers. He wanted puppets. He wanted employees who made him feel superior. So he fired me, in front of the entire floor, just to show everyone who the king was. He even smiled while handing me the termination letter. "Don't worry," Richard said, patting my shoulder like he was doing me a favor. "You'll find something. Somewhere." The whole office laughed. Like hyenas cheering for their alpha. I walked out with a cardboard box, a cracked heart, and one promise burning inside me: one day, I'm going to own something you'll beg to work for. Being fired crushed me. I had no savings, barely any rent money, and absolutely no idea what to do next. My landlord kept slipping eviction notices under my door. My car died. My girlfriend left. My so-called friends suddenly got busy. But pressure has a funny way of turning coal into diamonds. One night, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment, I opened my old laptop and searched how to start a business with no money. I read articles, watched free courses, studied entrepreneurship, marketing, coding, finance, for 16 hours a day, and slowly, painfully, something clicked. I realized that Richard's company, the same one that fired me, was stuck in the past. Their systems were slow. Their marketing was outdated. Their customer service was a joke. Richard thought he was untouchable, but I saw a weakness. A gap. A crack. A perfect opening. I started a small digital solution startup from my tiny apartment, just me and a borrowed laptop. No office. No employees. No money, just a fire in my chest. I named the company Novatech Solutions. At first, nobody cared. Nobody trusted a 25-year-old nobody, but I didn't quit. I hustled like my life depended on it. Cold emails. Cold calls. Freelance jobs. Side gigs. Some clients didn't pay. Some ghosted. Some laughed, but every tiny win stacked up. One client turned into 5. 5 turned into 20. 20 turned into 100. Within 2 years, Novatech exploded. We built apps. We rebuilt outdated systems. We fixed marketing disasters. We saved companies drowning in their own mess, and we did it better, faster, and cheaper than anyone. Investors started calling. Bigger clients started calling. I hired employees, real ones. People who were hungry. People who were ignored. People like me. And one fine morning, my manager rushed into my new office with a shocked face. "Jake, you won't believe this. We got a takeover offer." I laughed. "Who?" He swallowed hard. "Hale Industries. Richard's company, the same company that fired me. The same company that called me average. The same company whose workers laughed as I walked out the door. They were broke. Desperate. Falling apart. Their systems crashed. Their marketing tanked. Their clients walked away. Everything I once tried to fix, now destroyed them, and they wanted us to save them. I told my manager, "Schedule a meeting. I'll handle it." I walked into Hale Industries' boardroom wearing a suit that cost more than my old monthly salary. Richard stood there. Shocked. Pale. Silent. He looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Jake. Is that you?" Oh yeah, I said, smiling. It's me. The average guy. The board members explained the situation. They were drowning in debt. They needed Novatech to buy and restructure them. When they finished, I slid a folder across the table. Richard opened it, his face went white. It was a full acquisition offer. Novatech would buy Hale Industries, every building, every asset, every share, and Richard, he wouldn't get a single cent. He'd lose everything. Why, you can't do this, he stammered. You did it to yourself, I replied. You built a kingdom on fear, not respect. And this is what fear earns you. Richard tried to stand, but I stopped him. Oh, and Richard? He looked at me like a dog expecting the final kick. I'm firing you. Silence. The entire board stared at him as he collapsed back into his chair, the same way he made me fall years ago. Only difference, I didn't need to humiliate him in public. Losing everything was enough. As I walked out of the building, my building now, I whispered the promise I made at age 25. You should have never called me average. I didn't sleep the night after Marcus fired me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smirk, that lazy, arrogant grin he gave me right before he said, "You're just not leadership material, kid." Kid. That word burned worse than the firing itself. The world didn't slow down for me. Rent was still due. Bills still piled up. And my fridge still had nothing but a half bottle of ketchup pretending to be food, but something inside me flipped that night. Like a switch. A quiet, dangerous switch. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to crawl back. I wasn't going to let Marcus Carter write the ending of my story. Nah. I was going to write something he'd never forget. I made a decision. If I couldn't work for a company, I'd build one. Not out of ego. Not out of pride. But because I finally saw the truth. Bosses like Marcus don't fear employees. They fear competition. So I spent my last $1,400, the money I'd saved to replace my dying laptop, and bought a used MacBook from a shady dude on Craigslist who kept calling me brother like we were cousins. That machine became my weapon. I studied. Day. Night. Morning. Noon. I devoured everything: startups, coding basics, supply chains, marketing, operations, the stuff Marcus always hoarded behind closed doors like state secrets. I realized something wild. The business Marcus fired me from, it wasn't genius. It was just lazy, and laziness is the one thing you can beat with pure grind. 3 months later, my eyes were bloodshot, my bank account was hanging on life support, and my social life was officially pronounced dead. But I built a prototype, a tool that made small business inventory tracking stupid simple. Something Marcus's company had tried to build for years but kept failing because they were too busy strategizing. A small grocery chain in Ohio tested it. They loved it. They paid me $8,000. That money felt like $1 million, but I didn't buy anything stupid. No shoes. No new phone. Not even a pizza. I reinvested. That's when the real climb started. Within a year, my software had spread to multiple states. Not because I was some genius, I wasn't. But because small businesses were tired of overpriced, overcomplicated garbage built by corporate dinosaurs like Marcus. My company grew to 12 employees. Then 35. Then 60. We rented our first office, tiny, but ours. Then a bigger one, still ugly, but progress. Smells like fresh paint and broken drywall. Investors came. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a kid. I felt like someone who knew exactly what he was building. By year 3, we hit something I never expected, a valuation of $68 million. Me. The kid Marcus fired. The kid, he said, didn't have leadership material. Yeah. Turns out revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's slow, patient, and devastating, but the universe wasn't done yet, because soon, I'd hear the news that would flip everything upside down. One morning, while sipping the cheapest coffee my accountant still allowed me to drink, I got a call. Marcus's company, Carter Systems, had fallen apart, massive losses. Half their clients gone. Employee turnover through the roof. Investors panicking, they were preparing to sell, and the craziest part? Guess who they wanted to approach as a potential buyer? Yeah. Me, the kid, the one they kicked out like trash. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I didn't celebrate. Revenge tastes better when it's served cold, and I wasn't done cooking yet. I spent 3 months preparing for the moment I knew would change everything, the moment I would walk back into Crest Hill Dynamics, the same building where my life fell apart at 23. You know what's funny? Revenge isn't loud. It's slow. It's patient. It's basically a quiet flame that never goes out, even when you pretend you've moved on. And mine had turned into a wildfire. The acquisition deal finally cleared, signed, sealed, irreversible. Every lawyer confirmed it, every bank released funds, and every shareholder voted in my favor, because I offered them a future that my old boss, Richard Hale, could never produce in 10 lifetimes. The same man who once told me, "You're replaceable, Ethan. There's 100 kids like you waiting outside." Sure. But there weren't 100 kids like me with a billion-dollar empire behind them. When the final email came in, Crest Hill Dynamics is now under the full ownership of Cole Innovations LLC, I didn't jump. Didn't scream. Didn't celebrate. I just sat there, completely still, letting the silence swallow me whole, because this wasn't joy, this was closure. And closure is always quiet. I didn't bring a camera crew. Didn't bring investors or security. Just walked through the lobby wearing a simple black jacket, jeans, and a cold expression that said, "I'm here to collect what's mine." The receptionist looked up and nearly choked on her gum. Ethan? Wow, you look different. Good different? I asked, rich different. Fair enough. I walked past her and straight toward the elevator. Every employee stared like a ghost had walked in. Some whispered. Some pointed. Some looked away because they remembered exactly how they treated me on the day I was fired. People have selective amnesia, until your net worth reminds them, and there he was, Richard Hale, my old boss. Perfectly polished suit, fake confidence, the same frozen smirk he used the day he kicked me out. He started walking toward me with that confused, irritated, "Why is this guy here?" look. Ethan. What the hell are you doing? I cut him off by handing him a crisp folder. He opened it. His face drained like someone pulled the plug on his blood supply. What is this? You know what it is, I said. Read page 2. He flipped it, his hand started shaking. You bought the company? You bought my company. I leaned in a little. It stopped being your company the moment your board realized they didn't trust you anymore. He backed up, practically stumbling. This is illegal. You can't. It's actually very legal, I replied. Check the signatures. He flipped page after page, eyes wide. Board signatures. Bank signatures. Shareholder signatures. Inspection approvals. Severance directives. When he reached the last page, there it was, CEO termination, effective immediately. Richard Hale. He looked at me like he was seeing the devil in a cheap jacket. You're firing me? I gave him the same smile he gave me 2 years ago. Richard, you're replaceable. There's 100 guys like you out there. He froze. That I had waited so long to say that. Security gently walked him to collect his things, not forcefully. Not violently. Just enough to make the entire company watch. Employees peeked over cubicles. Some genuinely felt bad for him. Most didn't, and I didn't feel anything. Not hate. Not joy. Not triumph. I just felt done. When he reached the exit, he turned around and yelled, "You'll regret this. Companies don't run on revenge. You'll ruin everything." I raised an eyebrow. No. You ruined everything long before I got here. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Security opened the door. He walked out, and that was it. The man who once said I wasn't worth the chair I sat in, was now unemployed, carrying a cardboard box, walking down the same steps where he once stood above everyone. Funny how life flips itself. As soon as he left, silence filled the floor, then people started clapping, not the loud, we're celebrating a birthday type. It was softer, relieved. Like someone had finally turned off a fire alarm that had been ringing for years. One employee, Sarah, the woman who once defended me when Richard humiliated me in front of the team, walked up. She wiped a tear and said, "Ethan, we've been waiting for someone to get him out." I smiled. Let's start fixing what he broke. I didn't take Richard's office that I renovated it. Removed every trace of his ego. Built a glass-walled workspace at the center of the floor, so employees could walk in any time. I didn't want to be the new tyrant. I wanted to be the boss I once needed. By the end of the week, productivity skyrocketed. People laughed more. Projects moved smoother. Clients returned, not because I was a genius, but because I listened. And I remembered how it felt to be thrown away like trash, and I promised myself, no one under my roof would ever feel that again. A month later, I got a notification. Richard had applied for jobs, all rejected. His reputation? Destroyed by his own behavior, not by me. By who he chose to be. I stared at his failing profile for a moment and thought, revenge isn't when you ruin someone. Revenge is when they ruin themselves, and you're there to watch it. And just like that, I shut off my phone, leaned back in my chair, and looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows of the company I now owned, the company he once said I'd never be worthy of. Life has a wonderful sense of humor, and sometimes the kid they fired comes back, as the man who buys their entire world.